Retro Mondays.
Hey, what's happening, gamers? Welcome back to another Retro Monday, where the goal of this show is to turn your Monday into a fun day. Today's game really needs no introduction. Mega Man X was released for the Super Famicom in 1993. Now, work began on X after Mega Man 5 and Mega Man 6 wrapped up, although the series never received a proper ending. X creator wanted a darker, more plot-driven, mature Mega Man game, but at the same time he wanted to keep the series connected somehow. So he set the game ahead 100 years. Dr. Light and everyone else has long since passed away. X was his last creation and was found and reactivated by Dr. Kane. X then awakens to a world drenched in chaos. Eventually he meets up with the S-rank Maverick Hunter Zero, who saves him from Vile. Now, originally Zero was planned to be the new hero of this franchise, but Capcom said no. Thus, Mega Man X was born. Oddly enough though, Zero did become very popular, and would later be a playable character in X3, and have his own series on the Game Boy Advance. Not to mention the epic inclusion in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom Ultimate All-Stars. Anyway, the gameplay starts out very different than the previous Mega Man games. Instead of being sent to a familiar stage selection screen, players had to guide X through a collapsing bridge scene. This was done to get players familiar with the new gameplay mechanics. As with every Mega Man game, there are new additions to this series as well, such as scaling walls, the dash ability, armor upgrades, and the heart tank. In the past, Inafune was inspired by the RPG upgrading element, and already featured this with Rock keeping defeated foes' powers, but had now added gathering armor to supplement that concept. Scattered in the various stages, Dr. Light has managed to hide 4 enhancements. Don't ask me how he did it. These enhancements were boots to increase X's speed and agility, armor to increase his protection, the helmet to smash stuff with his head, and the X-Buster, which gives him a more powerful shot. Items still played an important role in this game too, but E-Tanks were now called sub-tanks and could be refilled by collecting health capsules. However, the heart tanks echoed the console RPG gaining experience traits. Once X finds this item, his energy bar increases. Lastly, this game does feature the password system and level select too. In fact, for the most part, X follows the same concept that made the series so well loved to begin with. You fight 8 robot masters that are now based on animals and called Mavericks, and defeating them you steal their power and you use it against another Maverick, so it's still the same. Then of course you face the Dr. Wily type character, which is now Sigma. With that being said though, I do have a small list of complaints with this game. For starters, why did we have to wait for X3 in order to play as Zero, since this game started out with Zero as the protagonist to begin with? As a kid, I never really understood that. Sure, I guess you could say, well, Zero sacrifices himself to save X against Vile. Even so, had the developers added that ability to switch the heroes for its day, that would have been a revolutionary game. Out of all the power-ups in this game, what is the point of the helmet? I mean, seriously. Sure, it can block the falling rocks in the Armadillo stage, but there wasn't a real proper use for it in this game, other than using it to get your upgraded arm cannon, that is. Don't even get me started on the water stage either. It wasn't too difficult, but for me it just seemed to slow down the pacing for the game. Another point I would like to address is the story. I know the creator wanted to make this game more story-driven, but I feel that the Super Nintendo didn't really do anything different than the NES games. The only time this game had any dialogue between the characters is when Zero, X, Vile, and Sigma were present, unless you count the words of Thomas Light to X. It wasn't until the remake for the PlayStation Portable that players were finally immersed in a richer storyline. It even provided a backstory for Sigma too. There are actually very few things that make me angry with today's games, but during my childhood, developers were just downright sinister at times, and the Mega Man X series continues that tradition. As the series went on, the frustration actually increased. However, the first game only made me insanely angry at one part. This is due to 3 factors: the respawning enemies, the flying ones, and wall jumping to progress through this part of the level. I hate all 3 of these things with the utmost passion for living. Still, when you combine all of these annoyances in one location, it's been known to induce rage. And apparently I'm not alone in this, so yay! Let's take a look at this part of Sigma's fortress, for example. When I was little, I would get stuck here for hours on end. This spot is filled with flying enemies, moving turrets, and enemies that come back if you go lower down the screen. Once you get hit, and you will, X slides down or falls off the wall completely. This made me lose my temper a lot and break a few Super Nintendo controllers. Because it seems simple enough to get up here, but it wasn't. You need a lot of patience, and that's not my strongest quality. Eventually, I did make it up past that part, and the rest of the game was pretty easy. Now with my gripes aside, time to share why this game rocks. To this day, X is still one of my all-time favorite video games. First off, the graphics for this game look incredible. The 16-bit visuals really impressed me back then and made me a believer and a super fan of the new Mega Man. The colors were wicked bright, and it didn't feel like the gloomy atmosphere that we saw in the previous Mega Man games. The character models just seemed to pop, and they looked really great. Not to mention the extra attention to detail in general was just top notch for this game. What really wowed me about the presentation of the game though was how the environments would change based on what Mavericks you defeated. So if you enter the Flame Mammoth stage after defeating Chill Penguin, ice has replaced the lava. Storm Eagle's demise wrecks the Spark Mandrill's home. Taking out the Octopus actually floods Sting's forest, and well, you get the idea. Another aspect of the game I liked is how the developers changed up the end of the game. Instead of facing all the Robot Masters at the end, you would actually face them as you made your way through Sigma's fortress. Musically, this game reminded me why I was a fan of the Blue Bomber to begin with. Not to mention it had that whole 90s rock vibe to it, you know, where everything in the 90s was extreme! Much like Street Fighter II, X was also composed by Capcom's in-house band Alpha Lyla, consisting of 5 talented members. Since the Super Nintendo had a superior sound chip technology to it, the Alphas made excellent use of that hardware to the T. Players could hear all the different types of instruments used in the score, and it just made this game even more awesome, if that's even possible. Each song echoed the excitement that the player felt as you entered each stage in Mega Man X. Plus, it doesn't hurt that the tunes are just so catchy and well composed either. We all know that gaining powers was a series staple since the beginning of Mega Man, but the new armor and improved power-ups made the X games stand out even more. Dashing around the stage made maneuvering around the enemies a lot more fun, and it also made future speedrunners very happy. The increased armor actually lowered the game's difficulty just a little bit. X could take a serious beating more than his ancestor Rock ever could. The X-Buster you're gonna get from Zero after facing Vile a second time. And no, I'm not gonna make a Boba Fett comparison. Aw crap. I just did, didn't I? Still, it is possible to get the gun early in the game. You just need the worthless helmet of uselessness to get it. Instead of a 2-charge shot, now you could do 3! And this acted like a critical hit for the game. However, with the utter success of Street Fighter II, Capcom put in an amazing Easter egg for the revision of Mega Man. That's right, folks. Ryu's Fireball was in this game. Collecting this power-up was a pain in the neck to be sure, but it was worth it! Just for killing almost every enemy in the game, including Sigma's annoying Pooch and Sigma's first form with 1 hit. Booyah! It works very well against the sub-bosses too though, like that spider thing. My favorite item in this game was the sub-tank though. Why? Well, unlike the previous Mega Man games, E-tanks could only be used once and then they would disappear. Not only do you have 4 tanks in this game, but they can be refilled after their use! So, why do I like the gameplay? Somehow Capcom had taken the previous control mechanics from the NES Rock games and made them even better. They did this by giving X more agility, which I have to say, that was genius! I'm of course talking about the dash and the wall kick abilities though. Both of these additions made fighting the bosses less frustrating in X, because players had a lot more freedom at their disposal and were able to get out of harm's way by scaling the walls, which made it simple to evade devastating attacks. Also, it helped to get behind the Mavericks really easily. Still, these two gameplay mechanics were used for discovering the many secret items in this game too. The exploration mechanic was made popular with games like The Legend of Zelda and Metroid, but it wasn't until Mega Man X that Capcom placed this feature in a Mega Man game. I remember when I was little that I had a blast revisiting the levels just to look for secrets. Personally, for me, it just felt like the X series had a lot more replay value in general than the older Mega Man games. Controls as a whole just felt perfect and responded so well. Passwords didn't really have a vital role in X because the difficulty wasn't insane. Don't get me wrong, you miss the upgrades and heart tanks, this game will beat you bad and toss you to the curb. But if you play smart, then the rewards are almost unlimited, folks. Not to mention all the cameos and hidden Easter eggs in this game gives the player more than enough reasons to revisit this game time and time again. In conclusion, Mega Man X is still a masterpiece to gaming as we know it, and you can see why so many people my age herald this game as one of the best ever created. Because it really is. The few things that this game did wrong were blown away by all the things it got right. With the overwhelming success of Mega Man X, Inafune would go on to continue the story up to X5, where he had originally planned to end the series to pick up with Zero's own game, Mega Man Zero. But Capcom instead released X6 without his permission and milked the series like they did with the original Mega Man games, eventually screwing up the continuity until everything was set straight after the Elf Wars. In 2006, Capcom would release the X Collection for the GameCube and PS2, plus Maverick Hunter X for the PSP. As of yet, none of the X titles are available on the Wii's Virtual Console or the PlayStation Network. The developers are expecting you to own the X Collection, even though it's really rare to find. In any case, I deeply suggest you guys and girls play this game as soon as possible and add it to your collection. This game defined a generation of gamers, rekindled the fire for our blue hero, and is still wicked fun to play today. Well, that wraps up another Retro Monday. Next episode, Total Biscuit and I will be doing an in-depth look at Streets of Rage for the Sega Genesis. Oh yeah. Don't forget to check me out on Facebook and Twitter. Also, if you're new to the show and liked what you saw, then please subscribe to support this and other content you've seen on this channel. Anyway, thanks so much for taking the time to watch Mega Man X. And until we meet again, gamers, God bless and happy gaming.